Mr. Speaker, I rise to conclude this first half of consideration by this Honorable House of Budget 2023. The first half, of course, focusing on the general policy debate in anticipation of the consideration of the estimates of expenditure next week. And as I do so, I thank all of my colleagues on this side of the House, and indeed the Honorable Deputy Speaker, for their various contributions, invaluable contributions, I add, to this debate. As is traditionally the case, ministers and members of Parliament took advantage of the opportunity presented by this budget debate to elaborate in far greater detail than the budget speech can itself do our government's plans, policies, plans, and programs, and the various initiatives contained not only in the budget, but indeed in our manifesto, and how we see successful and complete delivery of our manifesto commitments during the course of this term of office. The budget debate is, of course, a very important part of the annual economic cycle and an important part of the annual parliamentary calendar, presenting as it does not only an opportunity for government MPs and ministers to do as I just indicated, but also to present an opportunity for members on the opposite side of the House to articulate their alternative vision for the country, to outline alternative initiatives and proposals, considering that in a normal functioning democracy, the opposition would consider itself to be a government in waiting. Sadly, sir, on yet another occasion, the APNU AFC failed woefully to avail themselves of the opportunity presented by the debate on Budget 2023. Because instead of presenting an alternative vision for Guyana, instead of proposing alternative policies, programs, and initiatives, they regurgitated, sir, the standard and overworked and tired, old and overused diatribe, very tired, which has long been overtaken by time, which has been subject to multiple rounds of scrutiny by the people of Guyana, and which was roundly and robustly rejected by the people of Guyana in March of 2020. And you see, sir, why that is important is because we in the People's Progressive Party subscribe fully and in a completely unrestricted and unlimited manner, we subscribe fully and wholeheartedly to the democratic model of governance. And that democratic model of governance requires us to submit ourselves to an electorate once every 5 years, as is required by our Constitution, and that requires us to respect the will of the electorate. In fact, if one were to consider the political history of Guyana, one would see the People's Progressive Party accepting election results even in times when there was compelling evidence of those elections having been rigged. In fact, today, I don't believe that anybody even disputes, including anybody in the PNC, disputes the fact that elections were systematically rigged. This is now an accepted historic fact, that the PNC engaged systematically in electoral rigging for the entire duration of their time in office until 1992. And while one might have expected, if I'm to borrow a phrase used by the Honorable Minister Onej Walron, she spoke so appropriately of the leopard not having changed his spots. While one might have thought that having spent some time in opposition, that the PNC, however they now style themselves, APNU, AFC, APNU, AFC, one might have thought that they might have learned some lessons from the past. They returned to government, not having learned anything, and instead reverted instantly to their old dictatorial ways. What is even more alarming, sir, is that those ways having been roundly rejected in 2020. And maybe I should say this. In 2020, I think most people recognize that Guyana was at a historic juncture in its economic history. We had just become an oil-producing nation. I believe first oil was in December 2019. We just become an oil-producing nation. And I think that everybody, the Guyanese people, were fully seized by the magnitude of the moment. And they had, fortunately, the privilege of being able to look back in recent memory to consider the People's Progressive Party in government, well, in fact, those who are old enough to remember, to consider the PNC in government from 1964 to 1992, so they had a long period over which to observe the PNC in government. They had the period from 1992 to 2015 to observe the People's Progressive Party in government, so they had an alternative against which to compare. And then in case the pre-1992 era were a distant memory, or particularly for younger voters who might not recall or might not even have been around during the pre-1992 era, the Guyanese people were afforded the privilege of witnessing the PNC, now called APNU AFC, back in government from 2015 to 2020. So in 2020, Guyanese voters, young and old, went into the polling station, armed with a rich set of comparative experiences of alternative governments, and therefore better informed to make a decision as to who they wanted in government at this uniquely historic moment in our country's economic and broader evolution. And the people of Guyana, armed with that information, spoke resoundingly and elected the People's Progressive Party, civic, back to government. And Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt in my mind that having listened to the last 5 days of debate in this House, I have no doubt in my mind that the people of Guyana feel fully vindicated, indeed feel reinforced in the appropriateness of the judgment they made in 2020. Why do I say this? Mr. Speaker, I considered what approach I would take to this wrapping up of the debate. I could take every single speech presented or every single point made, and I made copious notes. and respond to them. That would take me a very long time, more than the 5 hours of my original speech. But I want in particular, sir, to focus on the speech given by the honorable leader of the opposition and one or two other critical issues, purely for illustrative purposes. And I will then, sir, close my case, or rest my case. Mr. Speaker, as I listened to the honorable leader of the opposition, a word that has fallen out of popular usage, a particular word came to my mind, and it's a word that, like I said, has fallen out of popular usage. So a lot of people might not be familiar with it, or perhaps they might. Mr. Speaker, about 100 years ago, there emerged, and I believe it's about 100 years ago, there emerged the usage of a word called bloviation. I think the Honorable Prime Minister is familiar with this word, bloviation, or bloviating. And the person who performs this, or the individual who engages in this bloviation is deemed a bloviator. And in case I was mistaken about the meaning of the word, sir, I resorted to that good friend of the modern man and modern woman. I referred to good old Google. And I confirmed my recollection, sir, that to bloviate, or the act, the bloviation, and this is the word that came to mind as I was listening to Mr. Norton. He struck me as a bloviator par excellence. And sir, so I, like I said, resorted to Google.
Give us the definition.
And Google tells us, sir, various dictionaries, you'll see it's defined all over the dictionaries, that to bloviate or bloviation, I'll just share with you two definitions.
Yeah, we want to hear it.
The art of speaking for as long as the occasion warrants, while saying nothing at all.
Bloviating.
Or secondly, sir, an army, and this one will resonate, this one applies particularly to Mr. Norton. An army of pompous phrases moving over the landscape in search of an idea.
Bloviating, that's my one definition.
Because Mr. Norton came here today, and bloviated for, I don't know, an hour and a half or 2 hours, bloviated, invoked all manner of outdated concepts that he might have encountered in the 1960s and 1970s, speaking about targeted tax breaks, speaking about people-centered development, speaking about, speaking all manner of lofty sounding words. Intellectual sagacity. He's a man, he's a man given to using all of these big words and fancy phrases to impress people with his intellectual capacity. While, sir, beneath that is absolutely no substance whatsoever. Asphyxiating. The budget is asphyxiating the Guyanese people. Sir, if you listened, as I'm sure you did, and as I know you always do, Mr. Norton started out on the premise, well, let's start out where he started out. I think maybe he thought he wanted to amuse us when he started out. I thought it was comedy and not bloviation that he intended. Because he started out by saying that when the PNC left office in his customary manner, he puffs out his chest and he puts on his important opposition leader voice to make sure that Roysdale is kept out of the job. And Mahipal. He came to the podium, sir. He came to the podium, Mr. Speaker, and he started out by saying, when the PNC left office in 1992, there was money in the budget to build the Linden to Soesdijk Highway. Sir, I know that you have an abundance of youth still on your side. But I know too that you can recall 1992 with perfect clarity. Sir, in 1992, the PNC destroyed Guyana. The Guyana, left in the state of PNC destruction, was incapable of paying public sector wages, was incapable of servicing the country's debts, was incapable, sir, of providing basic medication in hospitals. Minister Anthony reminds us that rodents would be crawling on the beds, biting the limbs of patients in the public hospital. And Mr. Norton comes here with a straight face, sir, and seeks to tell the people of Guyana that in 1992, I don't believe that there's anybody in Guyana who recalls 1992 with any degree of clarity would be able to forget the pain and suffering that Guyanese of that era were going through. No fuel, no electricity, lining up for fuel, days and weeks of blackout, no basic food supplies. That would be recalled, sir, that was the era, the pre-1992 era, was the era when basic food supplies were banned. Sir, when I say to young people that potatoes or wheaten flour were, not that you couldn't get them, they were illegal commodities. People were imprisoned. People were imprisoned for having wheaten flour and potatoes in their possession, like it was. When you tell people, sir, that you had to bury, sardines, sardine cans. There are backyards in Guyana that are like a landfill site for sardine cans. You had to bury because you were afraid to put your sardine can in the dustbin.
My neighbor was jailed because he belched and the police smelled the sardine.
Sir, and then Mr. Norton comes here, sir. Mr. Norton comes here, sir, and wants to paint this alternative reality, looking the people of Guyana straight in their faces and seeking to paint this parallel, this imagined reality, almost like they're living in a dream world. Almost like they're living in a dream world that, 1992 had money to fix the Linden. Sorry, in 1992, they couldn't fix Main Street. They couldn't fix Main Street. You couldn't drive. Those of you who had cars, and I'm going to come back to cars in a minute, you couldn't drive from the Pegasus Hotel to the Bank of Guyana in half an hour or with no traffic. You had to navigate from the Ministry of Finance to the Central Bank, navigate potholes. There were streets in Guyana that were popularly called, I recall some streets in Kitty that were popularly called Abortion Avenue. You couldn't navigate the street if you were an expectant mother. And Mr. Norton comes here today, sir, with a straight face and wants to tell us that in 1992 we were ready. Sir, The people of Guyana know better. But we shouldn't be surprised by this. We shouldn't be surprised by this because it is Mr. Norton and his party, and I'm not going to repeat, I've said this many times in this house and many of my colleagues have said it too. It was Mr. Norton and his party that looked the world in its face, in its faces, looked the people of the world in their faces, and said to them with a straight face, 33 is not bigger than 32. And they continue to say up to today, that they did not only that they did not rig the election, but that they won the election. They continue to say up to today, sir, that they won the election. Mr. Speaker, the reality is that in 1992, when the People's Progressive Party came to government, Guyana's debt to GDP ratio exceeded 600%. As a matter of fact, at the end of 1991, it was 617% to be precise. Consider that for a moment, sir, that your debt is 6 times the size of your economy. Sir, when we left office in 2015 rather, we had brought that down to less than 40%. From 617, sir, in 1992, to less than 40%. That was the legacy of the People's Progressive Party in 2015. And Mr. Speaker, there was no oil. They like to speak, they say now oil revenue. That was not achieved with the benefit of oil or oil revenue. It was achieved on the strength of prudent and responsible management by this People's Progressive Party civic in government. Sir, if you consider every single key economic indicator, they say, sir, they want to speak about 1992. They claim, sir, to love public servants. And they like to be selective about the facts that they bandy around. Consider for a moment, sir, that in 1992, when they left office, the public service minimum wage, the very public servants that they claim to love, the public service minimum wage in 1992, at the end of 1992, when they eventually demitted office, was the princely sum of $22 per month, the equivalent of $22 per month. $22 per month. Mr. Speaker, today we have increased that to the equivalent of $388 per month, from $22 per month. Now, is it where we would like it to be? It's not where we would like it to be. And it is our intention to continue to increase it progressively. But the answer, sir, is not to increase wages in a wild and reckless manner, that in fact would be more inflationary than anything else, and therefore undermine the value of people's fixed incomes, their salaries. The solution, sir, is progressively to increase it in a manner that ensures that the real value of wages and salaries is preserved. Mr. Norton comes here and makes, in their customary PNC manner, all manner of wild promises. He read out a list, I think he said it was 20, a list of 20, a motley crew, a random assortment of 20 initiatives or policies, whatever you want to call them. They moved from across the entire spectrum. I'm going to deal with some of them in a minute. They included, sir, a 50% increase in public service wages. Well, sir, we have trodden this path before. We've trodden this path before. You promised this to the public servants in 2015, but only gave it to yourselves. You promised it knowing that you didn't have oil money. You didn't promise it on the premise of oil money. You promised it, in fact, there was a very elaborate plan. There was a very elaborate plan, sir, on how it was going to be financed. I believe, I know one of my colleagues alluded to this plan. Sir, there was a very elaborate plan outlining how they will finance these initiatives. Sir, I refer you and Guyana to page 46 of the APNU AFC's 2015 election manifesto. The promises that they made to the people of Guyana in 2015 were they to be elected to office, including the 50% salary increase, including everything else. Rice, sugar, they're going to open rice, sugar, expand rice, sugar, everything. And they explained, sir, how they will finance this. They had a whole section, they had an entire team sitting down, analyzing and studying this, and they wrote a whole chapter on it. The chapter is called Reaping the Democratic Dividend. And they outlined 8 specific measures, a number of general measures, and then 8 specific initiatives. Reducing capital flight. This is currently estimated at $200 million annually. We expect savings to be between 10 and 20% of this total. Sir, I invite the APNU AFC to account to the people of Guyana for how much of this they achieved and what they did with it. Augmenting capital inflows. This is currently estimated at $450 million annually as a result of our improved political environment. That is the anticipated improvement in the political environment were they to be elected. Reducing incentives for the underground economy, currently estimated at 20 to 60% of official GDP. Sir, they're yet to report to us and the people of Guyana how they measured up against all of these promises. Sir, reducing procurement fraud. They come here and they speak about procurement and friends and family and what was it, the other one? Friends and family and favorites. Sir, reducing procurement fraud. They said that is estimated to be about 28 to 35% of total procurement. So in fact, I should go further. Of total procurement spending of $140 million. Billion, sorry. Let me say that again. Reducing procurement fraud. Estimated to be about 28 to 35% of total procurement spending of $140 billion. Sir, here again, I invite the APNU AFC to account to the nation for how they performed against this reduction. They had 5 years. We want to hear, how did you perform in reaping this democratic dividend? And having reaped it, why did you not deliver on your promises to the people? Tax reforms, and the list goes on. I'm not going to read all of them. Sir, the reality is that the APNU AFC has a long and well-established tradition of selling pipe dreams, of blowing hot air, of bloviating. And we were regaled with this for the entirety of the last 5 days. They claim, sir, so Mr. Norton also said that they increased public service salaries by, I think he said 70%. Well, that number is itself questionable, but let us set that aside for the moment. They may have increased public service salaries by whatever percent they want to claim, but let us give them the 70%. Let us give them the 70%. And imagine a typical public service family. Maybe two partners in this family, a couple. They have a couple of children who are going to school, maybe 3 children who are going to school. One, perhaps, maybe I can use the example that I gave last year. Perhaps one is a soldier, a policeman, and one is a public servant. Sir, while they may have given what might have appeared to be nominal increases, and like I said, the 70% number is highly questionable, and many public servants did not get 70%, they took it back by taking back the grants that we used to give to school children. They took it back by taking back the 1-month bonus that we used to give to the discipline services. They took it back by abolishing salary in lieu of leave, which we used to pay previously for people who didn't take their leave. And they took it back, sir, by putting taxes on electricity, on water, on medical supplies, on school supplies, and on all of the other 195 or so taxes that they imposed on the people of Guyana. They talk about VAT. He came today, sir, and he said they're going to reduce VAT by, I think he said 12% today. They're going to reduce it to 12%. Sir, they had promised a reduction in VAT. They came into office. They reduced it, I believe, from 16 to 14, if I'm not mistaken. And they then promptly put on the VAT on a long list of items that did not. So while they moved some items from 16 to 14, they moved a long list of items from 0 to 14. Sir, electricity and water moved from 0 to 14. Medical and educational supplies moved from 0 to 14. Heavy equipment for agriculture and industry moved from 0 to 14. And the list goes on. So this 3-card trick that the PNC has been trying to play on the people of Guyana, now you see, now you don't, you know, sometimes you go, what they call chick board. Is that what they call it, the chick board? You know the chick board? The 3-card trap, or you're moving something under 3 cups or so. It's not 3 cups. You're moving something under 3 cups. Now you see, you're familiar. Honorable members, man of the people like myself, you'd be familiar with this. You know, your old 3-card trick or the chick board, you're juggling, and no disrespect intended to anybody who either operates or patronizes a chick board. Sir, but this 3-card trick of trying to deceive the Guyanese people are wiser today. They're wiser. Let's take Linden. Here again, they speak about their love for Linden and Lindeners. So if you scrutinize what they promised they will give Lindeners, they said they will rescue and modernize the bauxite. Well, first of all, you know the first thing got to be a plan. They love a policy, a strategy, and a plan. They love, he mentioned a few actually, I made a note. He had a lot of plans and policies and vision. Oh yeah, they love vision too. They love vision. He mentioned a few, let me see. Surveys too, those are favorites of the. They love strategies, policies, plans, and surveys. In fact, out of his 20-point plan, most of them were surveys. They will have a survey. They will do a survey or a policy or a plan. As a matter of fact, sir, I think what he outlined was a plan to prepare plans. Steeped in theory. Steeped in theory. But void of practice and practicality and reality. Gone are the days, sir, when the people of Guyana are deceived by you telling them you will come up with a a strategy to alleviate and eradicate poverty, a survey for a human resource development. Big words to convey why Roysdale or whoever else might be contending for the job. Big words to convey Mr. Norton's entitlement to the office of the leader of the opposition. Big word, people-centered program, human resource development, a survey. So I wrote down the words. He delivered it like a big punchline. A survey needs to be done. Mr. Speaker, the people of Guyana, he said it about infrastructure too. Sir, Mr. Norton said, the Guyana needs a sound infrastructure development plan. Sound
bites.
Linking all the regions, all 10 of them. A sound infrastructure development plan. Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that there's anybody in Guyana who would be incapable of telling you what the infrastructural priorities of this country are. I don't believe there's anybody in this country who doesn't have a good grasp of what is needed. But Mr. Norton's solution is to commission a study and get somebody to prepare an elaborate plan to tell them what? That you need a bridge across the Demerara River?
A 3-lane bridge.
Oh, it was a 3-lane bridge that they were proposing? So he says we need a sound infrastructure development plan. Well, I'll tell you what. The people of Guyana are watching. My Guyanese brothers and sisters, while the APNU AFC are promising you a plan, we are promising you the roads. And we are building them and we are delivering them. He can take his 5 years or his 10. He had 5 years. They had 5 years, sir. They didn't deliver a single new piece of infrastructure that you can see. You can't even see that. It's overgrown by bush and woodlands. This is Durban Park, for those who didn't hear Minister Frank Anthony, the Durban Park, that wooden thing that they built there. Sir, the people of Guyana are impatient. They want things delivered now. In typical PNC style, they're going to prepare a plan, an infrastructure plan, to tell people what? That they want their community roads to be fixed. Sir, let me say this. I have and all of my colleagues on this side of the house, we've traveled the length and breadth of this country. You go into villages, you see people's children walking to school. Sometimes they have to take off their school shoes and put it in their book bag or tie it around their neck to navigate a community road that is flooded or that has holes or that is muddy. We have all been to villages that have back streets like this and children having to navigate these roads every morning to go to school. Those parents want their community road to be fixed.
Not a plan.
Not a plan.
And we are fixing it.
And we are fixing it. While Mr. Norton is pontificating with his big words and his plan, the People's Progressive Party civic government is delivering community roads to the people of Guyana. So you can make your plan if you wish, Mr. Norton. It's all them plans and policies and programs and surveys that you were doing and COIs that you were doing for 5 years that the people of Guyana decided that you in the APNU AFC are incapable of delivering anything to the people. And that is why they consigned you to the opposition benches. And sir, I could regale you and this honorable house with a very long list. You know, he invoked, these things are so hilarious, sir. They're so hilarious. He invoked a solitary academic paper. I can't remember if it was from Columbia University. It's a US university, I can't remember. He invoked a solitary academic paper, citing, putting on his academic, so we'll be impressed, this UG academic, this lecturer, citing this academic paper about how Puerto Rico developed and delivering it like it was a pearl of wisdom. Sir, anybody, I just operated Google to see what bloviate mean. Anybody could Google and find 1,000 papers on how Puerto Rico was developed, how Singapore was developed, how Malaysia was developed. Anybody could do that. He come with the paper. I don't know how they dated the paper, but if it's Puerto Rico, it probably was about several decades old. Because Puerto Rico went through this decades ago. Sorry, come with the Puerto Rico paper, citing it, like if it is a solitary pearl of wisdom. And this is kind of comedy. I mean, these people, they want to run a country, sir. They want to run a country. Well, let's not get into running Congress, please. It's not, I mean, I don't want to get into that blank check story, sir. I'm tempted, but let me not distract myself. Sir, so Mr. Norton says, let me find his words. He accuses us. Here's the accusation, the big accusation that he makes of this, the big criticism that he makes of this budget. He said this budget is a disaggregated set of projects with no policy. Well, I think the Honorable Member, Mr. Patterson, also said that. And then in his very next breath, he said, but y'all are doing our projects. Well, you got to make up your mind. But Mr. Norton said this budget is a disaggregated set of projects with no policies, no overarching policy. And sir, he then proceeded to list his 20 brilliant ideas. They jumped from human resource development to an innovative and people-centered approach, nice words, to a strategy to alleviate and eradicate poverty, to the conducting of a poverty survey, to the determination, this is another study, the determination of a livable income. Sir, the people want their incomes to rise. They don't want a study to tell them what is a livable income. The people want, first of all, to have an income. Those who don't have one, they want to have an income. They want a job so that they can earn an income, or they want to be trained so that they can get a job to earn an income. They don't want a study or a survey to tell them what is a livable income. How does that help a person who is not in work right now? Another pearl of wisdom, educating people in financial literacy. Well, we don't have a problem with that. I mean, we agree with educating people in everything. Sir, and he proceeded with this random list. He then leapt, I think, to public service salaries, to a grant for students to attend UG, to reducing of VAT. I think the next one was early childhood education centers. Refusing to acknowledge, sir, that we are already doing that. In fact, we have in the budget, and the Honorable Minister Vindhya Prasad spoke at length. Apparently, he didn't hear any of this. He didn't hear Minister Prasad's extensive presentation on what we're doing on not only daycare, but night care centers, and what we are doing about early childhood education, and what we are doing about vulnerable people like the elderly and the homeless. Mr. Norton missed all of that. Then I think he left the school, a random assortment of initiatives presented, first of all, that the people of Guyana will recognize as a set of empty promises, but then presented as though these form some kind of brilliant vision for Guyana as an alternative to the People's Progressive Party Civic's comprehensive manifesto and our successive budgets. And so, Mr. Speaker, what we were treated to by Mr. Norton was a timely reminder of why the people of Guyana decided that the APNU AFC belongs in the opposition. I want to say this too, that something else leapt out at me, and I don't know, I would be happy to be corrected if I'm wrong. But I heard Mr. Norton speak about a wide spectrum of issues: foreign affairs, infrastructure, children and women and homeless. Sir, as far as I know, they have, like most oppositions, a shadow cabinet structure. And during the week, we heard a shadow agriculture minister speak. We heard a shadow infrastructure minister speak, although sometimes it wasn't quite clear what they were speaking to. We heard a shadow social services minister speak. And as I listened to Mr. Norton's presentation, sir, I struggled to make a connection between this random assortment of ideas that he was bandying about and the presentations that were made by his respective shadow ministers.
Who is a shadow of the shadows?
My colleague says that maybe Mr. Norton is the shadow of the shadow ministers. I don't know. But this leads me, sir, to make the following point: that having spent 5 years in government and having lost government, you would have thought that the APNU AFC would have spent some time engaging in a little bit of self-examination. And one of the widely acknowledged reasons for them losing government is not only failure to deliver on their promises, but the very obvious chaotic, fragmented state of their government, with the left hand never knowing what the right hand is doing, and the absence of a coherent policy position. Incoherent. Sir, one of them says wages should be doubled. The other one says wages should be increased by 50%. One of them says UG fees should be removed, which incidentally is something we are committed to and we will deliver by 2025. The other one says give the UG students a grant. Some of them says cash grant. I remember one of them saying in a very disparaging way, cash grant here, cash grant there. I won't even try to replicate the tone of voice. I pride myself on my dramatic ability, sir, but I wouldn't try to replicate the tone of voice. One of them, more than one of them actually, said very disparagingly that this PPP is giving out cash grant here, cash grant there. You recall? Did they say capriciously too? Yes, capriciously sharing out cash grant. No planning, we're just giving out cash grants. Sir, and then another one come and said the cash grant should be double. And then another one come and said the cash grant shouldn't be once a year, it should be once a month. Another one said it should be once a term. And so, sir, with nothing else to do, because most of them ain't got nothing else to do. Right? With nothing else to do. This group of 31 people who claim to be representing almost a half of the population, well, they're still claiming to represent more than a half. This 31 persons, honorable members, with nothing else to do other than to fight each other about who signed the blank check and who signed the blank check, could not find the time, sir, to sit down and agree a common position. I heard the Shadow Minister of Education speak, and half of what the Shadow Minister of Education said was not consistent with what Mr. Norton came to say about education. I heard the Shadow Minister of Infrastructure speak. Half of what the Shadow Minister of Infrastructure speak bore no resemblance to what Mr. Norton said. It's like chalk and cheese. I heard the Shadow Minister of Agriculture speak. I heard nothing. Almost. Did he say anything about agriculture? Can't remember. It was so eminently forgettable. Sir, with so little else to do, these 31 APNU AFC members of parliament, and you'll note, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that I did not make the mistake to say 32. These 31 APNU AFC members of parliament could not find the time to agree. This is our position on cash grants. This is our position on any others, on infrastructure. This is our position on food security. They couldn't find the time. As a matter of fact, they have a manifesto. I don't even recall any of them referring to their 2020 manifesto. Apparently they want that to be quickly forgotten. Did any of them mention their 2020 manifesto on it? I don't recall any of them saying, this is our plan. As a matter of fact, Mr. Sinclair, I think the Honorable Attorney General said it well. While we are saying improving lives today, building prosperity for tomorrow, apparently the APNU AFC strategy is to share out the money today, and if I'm quoting you correctly, forget about tomorrow. Or if hell is not a non-parliamentary word, sir, to hell with tomorrow. And so we continue to be regaled the nation continued to be regaled by this pathetic display of incompetence, ineptitude, and incoherence for the whole of 5 days. But it was worse, sir. If it were that alone, it's worse. It's worse. Because beyond sheer incompetence and ineptitude, there appears, sir, to have been a very deliberate attempt at misrepresentation, distortion, and manipulation by either deliberately or, I don't know, maybe it's incompetence taken to its extreme. We heard, sir, this absurdity. And I believe both Honorable Member Jurita Fernandes and Honorable Member Valda Lawrence, I believe, repeated it. This absurdity that the non-oil economy in Guyana grew more slowly in the first 3 years of the People's Progressive Party being in government than the first 3 years of the APNU AFC being in government, amongst the several absurdities. And I'm not going to go through point by point, because that alone will take me until tonight. Sir, the non-oil economy, first of all, even if you take 2020, so I believe the Honourable Member Jurita Fernandes said that the non-oil economy grew by a paltry, in her words, 2.6% over the first 3 years of the PPP being in government. First of all, sir, I want to point out to her that even if you count 2020 as a PPP year, even if you count 2020 as a PPP year, and you take 2020, 2021, and 2022, you will not get an average growth rate of 2.6%. And I invite her, sir, to explain publicly to the Guyanese people how she arrived at the conclusion that the average growth rate in the first 3 years of this government amounted to 2.6%. I'm stating here, sir, in this Honorable House, that I'm inviting the Honorable Member Jurita Fernandes to explain to the nation how she arrived at that. Even if you include 2020 as a PPP year, but let me remind honorable members on that side of the House that 2020 could hardly be counted as a PPP year. Sir, perhaps if they understood the meaning of the word democracy and respected the results of the election in March 2020, then you might be forgiven for considering 2020 had the People's Progressive, had President Ali assumed office when he should have you might perhaps in March, in the first week of March 2020, you might be forgiven for counting 2020 as a PPP year. But not if the honourable member and her is cabal, a non-parliamentary word, sir. Not if the APNU AFC continue to squat illegally in office until August 2020. And in fact, perpetuated the economic doldrums that had been inflicted on this country as a result of the no confidence motion. Because from the time the no confidence motion was passed, the entire economy ground to a halt. People stopped investing, they stopped spending, they adopted a wait and see approach. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. And so by the time you got to 2020, sir, the economy was dead, completely dead. Add on top of that, the fact that you had COVID-19 in 2020, which was so dreadfully mismanaged by the APNU AFC, with no plan whatsoever. And 2020 could scarcely have been considered either a PPP year or a normal year. And anybody who wants to be taken seriously for their analysis must take that into account. And of course, if you exclude 2020, which I think logically and clearly you should, then you're left with 2021 when the economy started to recover. And in 2021, non-oil real growth in the non-oil economy amounted to 4.6%. In 2022, real growth in the non-oil economy is estimated at 11.5%. And so I'm curious, sir, at where you will recall that this very honorable member was caught in a similar situation last year and I think the year before, playing fast and loose with statistics and numbers. But sir, this fast and loose approach was not confined only to calculation of GDP and growth. And there was the example of the low-income mortgages, where the honorable member cited some numbers. She claimed that a low-income family or a family of modest income could not afford a mortgage, and she cited a hypothetical mortgage. What the honorable member did not disclose to this House, that the numbers she used related in fact not to a 30-year mortgage. Sir, everybody in Guyana who's going to take a mortgage today, they go for the maximum maturity. They go for a 30-year mortgage. There are thousands of young Guyanese people going to the bank and applying for mortgages today to build their homes, thanks to the People's Progressive Party housing program. And they're all taking 30-year mortgages, sir. What the honorable member did not disclose to the House was that she deliberately, I shouldn't say deliberately, but she perhaps accidentally, perhaps deliberately, chose a 10-year mortgage to use for the purposes of calculating the amount of the repayment. Now, sir, in all honesty, I don't know anybody, irrespective of their age. I do not know anybody who goes to the bank and takes a 10-year mortgage. But of course, it's convenient because it allows you to inflate the repayment, the amortization, the amount that you have to pay every month. It allows to make it look unaffordable. Can you imagine that? Deliberately coming and also going to the most expensive bank, not going to the New Building Society or elsewhere where you can get a more affordable interest rate, going to the most expensive bank, taking the highest interest rate, taking the shortest repayment period and coming here and regaling this House with her bogus analysis, like all of the rest of her analysis, or bogus analysis, to mislead the people of Guyana. Sir, I could give dozens of examples where the statistics cited or the reference cited were blatantly either distorted or opportunistically selected. I'm going to give I think maybe I'll confine myself maybe to 2 or 3 examples. I know that my colleagues might be disappointed if I give an abbreviated presentation today. But I'm going to confine myself, sir, to maybe just 2 or 3 examples. Sir, much ado was made of a certain FAO report. Much ado. And they trotted out here, one after the other. Trotted out, let me see. Almost all of them trotted out here. Not one of them. Not one of them read the report. That's correct. Sir, they trotted out here, one after the other. I'm not going to name them. One after the other. Including, tragically, I can excuse the backbenchers who maybe, feel comfortable citing Peeping Tom. I read Peeping Tom. I was surprised they didn't cite them boys. But they came here one after the other, including frontbenchers, including the Honourable Member Roysdale Ford, the Honourable Member Kemraj Ramjatan. These are senior members of Parliament who should be setting an example for their younger MPs. These are people who should be setting an example. And they bandied this fact that the FAO said that 43% of Guyanese cannot afford a healthy diet. They kept repeating this thing, for shock value. 43% of Guyanese cannot afford a healthy diet. Intended to shock, like half of the Guyanese people are starving, can't afford food. Sir, let's put things, and of course, like my colleague just said, none of them actually went to the PAHO report, I'm sure. They were all citing from the Kaichor News article, which indeed says 43% of Guyanese can't afford healthy diet. Indeed, that's what the Kaichor News article says. But sir, if one is to be intellectually honest, if one is to be honest with oneself, and I know they are incapable of that. The Honorable Prime Minister spoke about, I think it was Noam Chomsky, you cited, I don't want to misquote you, but he made a reference to knowing yourself. And I think another colleague on my side of the house spoke of knowing oneself. Sir, if one were to be honest with oneself, you would ask yourself this question. First of all, 43% means almost 1 in 2. Let us say that MPs are not a representative sample of Guyana. Let us say that MPs are not a representative sample of Guyana. Let us take any village, any community, any part of Guyana. Do we seriously believe that 1 in 2 Guyanese persons can't eat? Do we seriously believe that? Well, it was several of them who said it. Sir, one has to examine. I'm not going to get into the fact that this data does not even relate to a period during which the PPP was in government. I'm not going to quibble about whether the data is 2018 or 2019 or 2020. Let us consider, first of all, the logic. Let us consider, furthermore, that in fact, the FAO also reports that even though the Guyana average is 43%, that we're actually doing better than the Caribbean, that the Caribbean average is 50%. They conveniently omitted that fact. Let us forget, sir, that if you examine the structure of Caribbean economies, and in particular of the Guyanese economy, If we were to consider, sir, the structure of the Guyanese economy, let's not even get into the statistics about the size of the sample size that was used, and the methodology and the representativeness of the sample. Let's put aside all of those facts that should be considered. If you contemplate, sir, the structure of Guyanese society and the Guyanese economy, you have a large informal economy where a lot of people don't report any income, but they're self-employed or they're doing unsalaried work. Those people don't report any income. If you ask them what their income is, they'll say they don't have an income because they don't get a monthly salary. But they're all engaged in some form of rewarded economic work or other. If you go to a rural community or a hinterland community, a subsistence farming community that plants and breeds animals, plants crops and breeds animals for their own subsistence and maybe for barter with their neighbors or for sell in their local market. If you ask them what their income is, they'll say they don't work because they're planting something in the backyard, they're mining a couple chicken, they got a chicken pen or some ducks or some black, or now thanks to Honorable Minister Zulfikar Mustafa, they probably have some black giant chicks, they probably have some black belly sheep in their backyard, they've probably collected some citrus seedlings and they're planting those seedlings, they probably have some cassava growing in the ground, but if you ask them what their income is, they'll say they don't have an income. They just plant something in the backyard and they live in. And so you're going to have, if you were to survey families in rural and hinterland communities, you will find, in fact, that their income, their monetary income, will in fact have the illusion of either being completely non-existent, that they don't earn an income in a traditional sense of a salary, or that it is significantly understated. That is the reality. That is the reality in economies and in societies like ours. That is why, sir, when you seek to measure certain economic metrics, you have to take into account those realities. You have to. And so they conveniently chose to ignore the year to which the data related, the source of the data and the methodology that was used, the comparison with the rest of the Caribbean. But, sir, they rather conveniently also chose to ignore the rest of the report. Because if you consider, sir, the rest of the report, you will see a large number of tables. The report is rich with information. It lists the prevalence of anemia amongst women, adult women, the prevalence of obesity or overweight amongst children under 5, the prevalence of stunting among children under 5, and it goes on. It has a whole appendix full of tables. The incidence of food insecurity. And they conveniently, sir, choose to ignore the fact that in many of these other indicators, which are important indicators of food security, Guyana, in fact, outperforms many countries in the Caribbean and in Latin America. Let me quote, sir, from the report. I will quote. Sir, the report actually says here on page 2022, just to give one example, among the countries that managed to reduce the prevalence of stunting between 2012 and 2020, Guyana did the best at 30%. Here it is. Our children and reducing the incidence of stunting in the entire range of countries surveyed in all of Latin America and the Caribbean. From 2012 to 2020, Guyana managed to increase, or to improve rather, improve by reducing the prevalence of stunting. But they didn't see that. They didn't see that. And I'm not quibbling about whether it's PPP or PNC. I include the whole period. I am happy. We are happy. The People's Progressive Party, civic government is happy. Whether it happened between 1992 and 2015, or 2015 and 2020, we are happy that it happened because it means that our children are better off. We're not quibbling about when it happened. But they conveniently omitted this. And instead, sir, were either too lazy to refer to the primary source, the report, or deliberately selective in what they wanted to highlight. There are indeed, sir, several other examples of the same. In fact, still on food security. I would refer them, sir, to another report that cites a very important statistic that I want to share with this Honorable House. And in this instance, it will be an achievement made during the People's Progressive Party, unequivocally, an achievement recorded during our previous stewardship in government. I refer here to the FAO's State of Food Insecurity in the Caribbean, meeting the 2015 hunger targets, taking stock of uneven progress. This was a report done in 2015 as we were about to demit office. I turn, sir, to page 2. Prevalence of undernourished people in the Caribbean. The report indicates, sir, that the prevalence of undernourishment for Guyana, of course it lists all the other countries, and incidentally, Guyana performs much better than all the other countries. In fact, I will tell you this. It has the statistics for several years. So it starts with the 1990 to 92 period. Mr. Speaker, in 1990 to 92 period, the incidence of undernourishment in Guyana was at a staggering 22.8%. A staggering 22.8%, meaning almost 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 persons. At that time, sir, and they like to compare us with other countries, at that time, sir, there was only one other country in the hemisphere that exceeded the incidence of malnourishment. Sir, by the time we demitted office, we had reduced the incidence of malnourishment. According to this FAO report, we had more than halved, we had reduced by more than a half the incidence of malnourishment from 22.8% in 1990 to 1992 to 10.6% by the time we left office. FAO statistics. And I could go on, sir. There are many, many, many examples that could be given. Many examples that could be given. Like I said, I will confine myself only to a few examples. The ones that I consider to have been repeated more frequently. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member, Mr. Patterson, spoke yesterday. Was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. He spoke yesterday, and amongst the various points that he made, he spoke extensively on the Amila Falls hydropower project. And he pronounced very boldly. He said, sir, for the record, the Amila Falls project was not killed by the opposition, the then opposition themselves. It was stillborn. It died from malnutrition, he added for dramatic effect. a lack of technical and financial sustenance, bad parents. The essence of what he said, sir, was that they played no part in killing the Amaila Falls hydropower project. Mr. Speaker, I wish, sir, to take us back to the period when these events were in fact unfolding before our very eyes. I will share with you, sir, an article I could share with you several, in fact. I will share with you, first of all, a statement made on August 21st, 2013. I think it might have been August 20th, 2013. Either the day of or the day after the APNU voted against the Amaila Falls project. I will share with you, sir, a statement made by the then president of the National Amerindian Development Foundation, and in fact he was joined by several other Amerindian leaders, which stated that APNU's brutal axing, this was carried in the Guyana Chronicle of August 21st, 2013, APNU's brutal axing of Amaila project meant to cripple government's development strategy. This was reported, sir, on the 21st of August, 2023. The previous week, sir, we were getting some insights into what would be transpiring. Because we have here a report that says APNU not budging on Amaila. APNU not budging on Amaila. And the article said, despite a 7 a.m. call to the then opposition leader by the then president, who would have been President Donald Ramatara at the time, on a Sunday morning, that 7 a.m. Sunday morning call failed to budge APNU's decision not to support Amaila. And for us to understand the background to this, I will refer you, sir, to the 9th of August 2013. Stabroek News, Scythe Global pulls out of Amaila. And I want to read, sir, 2 paragraphs of that Stabroek News article. According to sources, Scythe Global has informed President Donald Ramatara of its decision to pull out of Amaila. The president is expected to make a statement on Scythe's walking away from the project. Scythe Global's president, Brian Kubik, today said that the company will be making a statement in the press on Sunday. In an email to this newspaper, to Stabroek News, Kubik said that his company's position remained the same, that the project was too large to continue without national consensus. Kubik had issued explicit statements that unless all 3 parties in Parliament backed 2 measures in Parliament for the project, his company would pull out. At Wednesday's crucial session of Parliament on the 2 Amaila measures, the AFC, and this is an interesting development which I will elaborate on, the AFC changed its position and voted with the PPPC. But apparently Mr. Patterson doesn't remember that, or he believes that the people of Guyana have forgotten that. Let me repeat that. At Wednesday's crucial session of Parliament on the 2 Amaila measures, the AFC changed its position and voted with the PPPC. while the main opposition, APNU, voted solidly against. This would have tipped Scythe in the direction of quitting a project, etc., etc. Sir, let me also share an article so that the gravity and credibility of this matter is fully appreciated. Or rather, the gravity of the matter is fully appreciated and the credibility of the sources is reinforced. Not to cast any aspersions on any of the sources that I've cited already. But sir, on, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the same week, I believe it might be the 12th of August or thereabouts, 13th of August, Reuters, sir, Reuters international news agency, well known to all of us, carried a story. US power developer pulls out of $858 million Guyana project, carried by Reuters. And I want to read what this Reuters story says. US-based power developer, Scythe Global, has pulled out of an $858 million hydroelectric generation project in the South American nation of Guyana. And here are the operative words: citing political wrangling that prevented it from obtaining financing. Scythe Global, majority owned by hedge funds managed by investment giant, the Blackstone Group, said the Guyanese parliament had not fully supported legislation needed for the Inter-American Development Bank to provide financing for the 165 megawatt dam. The Reuters article goes on. It quotes President Ramotar as saying that the company's withdrawal from the project could jeopardize a $250 million environmental protection deal signed with Norway. Yep. We're all familiar with the GRIF, and the fact that the GRIF had intended to fund or support, provide financial support for the project, from which the government had set aside $80 million towards financing the hydropower project. The Reuters article goes further, sir. The project cannot move forward despite 16 years of work and over $16 million of independent Scythe Global expenditure and more than $15 million of government expenditure, Scythe Global said in an ad published in Guyanese newspapers on Sunday. Mr. Speaker, the Guyanese people, my Guyanese brothers and sisters, would be well worth the time were I, sir, to refresh the memories of my Guyanese brothers and sisters of what was contained in that ad. A full-page ad carried on Sunday, August 11th, 2013, in all of the daily newspapers carried by Scythe Global. And here I have a copy of that full-page ad. With your permission, sir, let me read some extracts from that full-page ad. Scythe Global thanks the people of Guyana for comprehensively considering the Amaila Falls hydropower project, hydroelectric project. The project was supported by the PPP, AFC, and virtually all other non-partisan organizations that reviewed the project. However, it was not supported unanimously by all three political parties, a necessary prerequisite to the project receiving international development funds required to complete it. Mr. Speaker, there are no prizes for guessing who was the third party. There are no prizes for guessing, no garlands to be given out, no gifts to be given for who I believe the phrase wrecking ball was used during this week. The political party that has now gained notoriety for being Guyana's wrecking ball throughout throughout Guyana's history. There are no prizes, sir, for guessing who that third party was. It's very interesting, sir, in fact, that around the same time, a column was carried on the 8th of September 2013 by the then chairman of the Alliance for Change. I'm reading here, sir, this is Kaichur News. A column authored by the chairman of the AFC. The column is entitled, "The AFC Journey, a Political Road Less Traveled, a Responsibility We Must Own." And this article was written, sir, by Mr. Hughes. And I will quote from this article. This article was explaining why the AFC decided in the last minute to support the project. And I will quote, the AFC, I'm quoting from Mr. Nigel Hughes' article here, sir. The AFC is today rising in the conscience of the Guyanese people as we say and do what is in their interest. We share and feel the people's heartbeat for affordable, renewable energy security.
General Secretary saying something.
Not only from hydropower, but from a portfolio of sources including ethanol, wind and solar power, and cogeneration using bagasse and wood waste. Therefore, we have every reason to support the development of hydropower in Guyana, but with the clear caveat that it must be environmentally, socially, and economically feasible. An elaborate explanation of why the AFC decided at the very last minute to vote in favor of that motion. But apparently, sir, that entire history is conveniently forgotten by Mr. Honorable Member, Mr. Patterson. Who was he, the General Secretary at that time? Who now comes, sir, conveniently forgetting the views expressed by his party at that time. Mind you, I'm not saying that the AFC did not collude with APNU in obstructing this project. I'm not saying, don't get me wrong at all, sir. I'm not suggesting that the AFC was not a co-conspirator and did not collude in frustrating and derailing this project. But in this instance, sir, in this instance, voted in favor of the project. It may be useful, sir, to check who was involved in the setting up of the registration of the local companies for the Amila Falls project and who the company secretary was and so on and so forth, to get a better appreciation of what some of the vested interests were. That might be a relevant consideration in the matter, sir. It may be a relevant consideration to examine who was being paid to do the PR for Size Global. And all of those considerations, perhaps, I'm not saying they did or they didn't. It may perhaps be the case that all of those considerations may have influenced, may or may not have influenced the AFC position. But suffice it to say, and I would encourage the Guyanese public to go back into history and examine where the company was registered, who the company secretary was at the time, who was doing the PR for the company, and you might get a better understanding of the AFC support, but they're supported nevertheless. But Mr. Patterson comes now to the House, sir, and conveniently forgets all of that. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to leave the subject of Amila quite as yet, though. My colleague, the distinguished Minister of Governance, has already cited, and many others have cited from the Norconsult report. In fact, I see another article here, maybe that I should quote. It has Mr. Ramjatan and what did somebody call him? The infamous Nimakaram. I see a photograph here of Mr. Honorable Member Mr. Ramjatan and the man now styled alternatively Nimakaram and rubber stamp, depending on which you prefer. An article headed, AFC support was lifeline for a Mila project, says Ramjatan. We did this because we felt we had to more or less give a lifeline to the Amila project, because largely we are supporters of hydroelectricity in Guyana. Sir, like I said, I don't want to speculate on what considerations may have influenced their support at that time, but they supported it. They appear now conveniently to have forgotten that they supported it. But the records are there. The records are there. And it's all in the Hansard. I have the Hansard here. I'm not going to regale you. I have the Hansard here. I can read the speeches that were delivered, Mr. Speaker. I have the Hansards here. I have the relevant pages flagged, and if you insist, sir, I'm disinclined to read the relevant extracts on this occasion, sir, but if you insist, I'd be happy so to do. But I want, sir, also to spend a minute or two to explain what they did to Guyana. So, we just heard an article, the full page ad where SAIS Global withdrew from the project because they didn't get universal support in the Parliament of Guyana. The Guyanese people would understandably want to know, well, so who is SAIS Global? Mr. Speaker, SAIS Global is a subsidiary of, or was at the time a subsidiary, at the time I believe 80% owned subsidiary of the Blackstone Group. Mr. Speaker, the Blackstone Group is the world's largest alternative investment firm, the largest alternative investment firm in the world. The Blackstone Group, which incidentally is traded on the New York Stock Exchange today, well, in fact, I should say, at close of business yesterday, was managing total assets. The Blackstone Group was managing yesterday, sir, at close of business yesterday, total assets of $975 billion US dollars. 970, that's the parent group. 975 billion US dollars. They owned 80% of SAIS Global, and SAIS Global was a company that had extensive experience in developing power projects around the world. I will cite, sir, just a few examples. They developed, sir, the Goreway Station in Brampton, Ontario, in Canada. That, sir, is an 875 megawatt project. 875 megawatt project in Canada. That project, incidentally, was successfully completed and in operation. They built, sir, the Bujugali hydroelectric project on the Nile River in Uganda, a 250 megawatt run-of-the-river project in Uganda. They built, sir, the Mariveles station on the Bataan Peninsula in the Philippines, a 600 megawatt project. They built, sir, the Dinganin station also on the Bataan Peninsula in the Philippines, a 1,336 megawatt project. We were building 156 megawatts at Amaila. 165. Sir, these people were building power plants all over the world. They've been doing this for years, all over the world. They had in-house expertise, they bought in expertise, as needed. And I only cited a few, sir. They have a number of others. Their portfolio included a facility in New Mexico, facilities in Nevada, facilities in Pennsylvania, facilities around the world that Size Global had built around the world. These people knew what they were doing. They were part of a large, credible international investment group. But yet, sir, the APNU AFC, and I would welcome them indicating who their resident experts are or were at the time. Their in-house, I don't know if it was the honorable member, Mr. Patterson, they decided upon themselves, sir, that these people didn't know what they're doing, and they were going to block this project and obstruct this project. We, sir, this People's Progressive Party, when in government previously, long before oil, long before ExxonMobil, had succeeded in bringing to Guyana one of the largest investment firms in the world to invest in hydropower in Guyana. Mr. Speaker, I have two simple points to end my remarks on that particular matter. I still have a few other matters to address, but not too many. One, Amaila Falls did not happen as a direct consequence of actions taken by the APNU AFC in this House, notwithstanding the last-minute change of heart by the AFC. I'm saying definitively, sir, and I will repeat it for emphasis. Amaila Falls did not happen because of direct obstruction by the APNU AFC. And sir, my second point in that regard is that for Mr. Patterson to now come and try to rewrite history, try to, as if none of this happened. This is in the parliamentary record. It's in the media. Sir, this is as if none of this happened. To come to say that APNU AFC played no role in this at all. Sir, I fear that I could not adequately describe what he would have committed in that regard without venturing into the realms of severely unparliamentary language. And it is not my inclination so to do today. Suffice it to say, sir, that once again Mr. Patterson tried to hoodwink the people of Guyana. We all recall Mr. Patterson boldly saying to the people of Guyana, I wear no jewelry. And the next day, sir, the internet crashed. The next day, the internet crashed with photographs of Mr. Patterson wearing all sorts of bang bracelets. He was so bold. How can you, sir, how can you forget whether you wear jewelry or not? Which one of us, sir, can forget whether you wear jewelry or not? Mr. Patterson boldly said, I wear no, he's on camera saying it, I wear no jewelry. Sir, within an hour, all you had to do was Google his name. And every photograph had all manner of adornments, all manner of metallic adornments on his wrists and the rest of his, whatever else, I don't know what other jewelry he wears. This is the same gentleman, sir. And I say this really to draw the following conclusion, and it is illustrative of all that we heard throughout the week. Sir, the APNU AFC is, I can't even call them a coalition any longer. They are a collective of convenience now. I think they've said the coalition has been disbanded, although I have my doubts about that. They are a collective, sir, devoid of any credibility. Devoid of any credibility. And that's the one thing that they have in common. Well, they have a couple others. Nothing that they have ever promised to the people of Guyana did they deliver. Nothing. And the people of Guyana will not be fooled over and over and over again. They came here and they say, we will do this, we will do that, we will do this. When we, now, if we were in government and if we had the oil money, you now have oil money. Sir, they received oil money. It will be recalled, sir, that they very notoriously received a signing bonus of 18 million US dollars and for months denied its existence. No less a person than the then finance minister said, we neither requested nor received a signing bonus. That's long before, so many years later he would say he thought it was a gift. Sir, if they would do that with an $18 million signing bonus, one has to shudder to imagine. One has to shudder to imagine. One can only shudder when one considers and imagines what they would do with the oil revenues that we are and will be receiving in the future. But secondly, in addition to their lack of credibility, what we were treated to over the last 5 days was a display of their complete lack of competence and capability. This incoherence of their policy positions is not by accident. They are devoid of any competence or capability. Sir, I have said elsewhere that apparently the APNU AFC felt that government is unskilled labor. I have said elsewhere that they apparently felt that government is unskilled labor. That apparently you can cobble together a bunch of buffoons and brigands, put them in government, give them roles. I withdraw, sir. Apparently, you can put buffoon is not on parliamentary, but I won't use it. Apparently, sir, you can put together, you can bandy around. I mean, you know, the words are suitable, you know. Sir, you can put together a motley crew of people who have no relevant experience, no relevant expertise, no relevant track record, no relevant accomplishment or achievement, none whatsoever. No inclination to learn. In fact, instead are more akin to, I don't even want to insult the bulls, but you know, we speak of the bull in a china shop. Sir, apparently they felt that you could put together a motley crew, throw them in roles in government, and let them loose. And that is precisely what they did in 2015. Put together a bunch of misfits, completely incompetent and incapable of discharging their respective roles, charging around like bulls in china shops, breaking up institutional structures, harassing people, penalizing and persecuting those who didn't fit their mold, and in the process, wreaking havoc across the length and breadth of the country. Sir, it's not an accident that every single industry and every single structure in this country was destroyed in 5 years. As a matter of fact, sir, you have to wonder how they managed to unleash such a tornado of destruction in such a short space of time. They killed the sugar industry. They killed agriculture. They destroyed forestry. Sir, they claim to love, they spoke, somebody spoke, Ms. Walda Lawrence spoke loftily about bauxite production. But what bauxite production was, Mr. Speaker, They were actively complicit, if not the instigators, who chased out an international investor from the Berbice River, Rusal, thereby putting more than 1,000 persons out of work. Sir, you can't claim to love the bauxite workers and incite harassment of an investor who's employing 1,000 people. So they were charging around like bulls in a china shop, breaking up everything. And unlike the Honorable Minister Ben, none of them is a geologist licensed to carry a hammer. But they were walking around the country brandishing this mallet, brandishing hammers and mallets everywhere, breaking up everything. Sir, if you look at all of the institutional structures, everything. We moved from 2015, sir, there can be no doubt that 2015 to 2020 were the lost years. If you consider the trajectory that we were on, as a matter of fact, I will go further, because they were brandishing not only a hammer, but they were brandishing also a deadly scissors. The Nimakaram used to come here, the rubber stamp used to come here and brandish his fingers as a proverbial scissor, like a proverbial imitating metaphorically to symbolize the scissors.
That's why they
Cutting budgets everywhere. So in fact, it's not only 2015 to 2020, Guyana has been struggling from 2011 to 2020, almost 10 years.
While they tasted power, while the super journey.
That's correct.
Does it taste the power?
Having tasted the power of a one-seat majority and having abused it in the manner that they did, sir, they went completely berserk, assumed office, and wrought havoc across Guyana. But I have news for them. Government is not on skilled labor.
And it is becoming increasingly so.
It's not on skilled labor. Sir, let me tell you, I'm under no illusion. If you ask me to go and build even a foul pen, you'll be asking the wrong man. I don't have the competence to build a foul pen. I don't know, I'm not a builder. I'm not a carpenter. But I know some good carpenters that I can go to if I need to build a foul pen and employ them. If you ask me, sir, to fix the pipes in your house, I would tell you, I appreciate your confidence in me, but I'm not a plumber. And I don't know how to fix pipe, but I know some good plumbers. And my colleague, the distinguished Attorney General, knows even more good plumbers than I do. He can refer you to some. Sir, if you tell me that the lights are flickering in the building, I will say to you, it might be low voltage,
I don't deal with electricity.
but I don't deal with electricity. I will get an electrician to come and fix the light.
What's all in there?
If you tell me your heart hurting you and you think you need a stent, I would say to you, again, I appreciate your confidence in me. I know you think that I'm a smart and capable person, but I don't know nothing about fixing heart and I don't know nothing about putting stent in heart. I'm not a heart specialist, but I know a few good ones, very good ones. If you tell me you get a pain in your head, I will say to you, I'm not a neurosurgeon. I can't fix your brain. I can't go in and fix your head, but I know a few good neurosurgeons who could do that. Sir, we must know what our respective competence is.
Stay in that field.
We must apply our respective competence as we best can. And where we need proper and sound advice, we must seek it and consider it carefully. I'm not necessarily saying always accept it, but be guided by it. Take it into serious consideration. What we were treated to, sir, is that not only from 2011 to 2015, And not only from 2015 to 2020 did APNU AFC believe that anybody could stand up and pronounce on anything, because all sorts of things they're pronouncing on. They're talking, I mean, to give you an example, I mean, if you were to take just the speeches of Honorable Member Jurita Fanans, Honorable Member Valda Lawrence, and the Honorable Leader of the Opposition. I want to explain, I didn't give that explanation about Plummer and so on just to make joke, just for purposes of jest. If you listen to them, sir, in one breath, they're talking about the size of the deficit. And they're talking about expansionary policy and impact on inflation. In the next breath, sir, they roll out a long list of policies that involve cutting taxes more and spending more, and in particular spending more on government consumption. Mr. Norton read out his long list of 20 items. Sir, none of them don't involve constraining spending, and none of them didn't involve income generation, revenue generation. Every single item involved surrendering more government revenue and spending more government finances. Every single proposal involved, put aside the fact that he didn't cost any of them, he didn't talk about what they would do to the deficit, he didn't talk about what they don't do to the debt. I don't know if he don't talk to Valda and what's your name, and Jurita, the honorable members. I don't know if he doesn't speak to the honorable members, Jurita Fanans and Valda Lawrence. But he came with his long list of, they had just spoken loftily about the deficit and how big the deficit is and the impact on debt and the impact on inflation, loftily. And he comes, I don't want to get into who is an English doc and who is not an English doc. I don't want to get into who is the English doc and who is not the English doc. Sir, so in one breath, as a matter of fact, in their own speeches, if you listen to the honorable member Jurita Fanans, she has a number of proposals about spending more, a number of proposals about giving additional tax reliefs. And then she comes back and says, but she's concerned about the deficit and debt. The two don't go with each other. They don't go with each other. So even within their own thought processes, and this applies to everybody, I'm only going to focus on, like I said, a few people. A lot of them jumped up and, sir, with no even internal consistency in what they were saying. They talk about Dutch disease with no clear understanding of what Dutch disease even involves, much less how to counteract it and minimize its risks. None whatsoever. They speak of promoting agriculture, but then Mr. Ramjatan, who claims to come from a food-producing community, lambastes the support that we're providing to the agricultural sector. Lambasting sugar. Sorry, he rather astonishingly used the word. I made a comment about it on the sidelines of the parliament in the heckle. He spoke about right sizing, and he seems to think somehow that this puts some kind of veneer of decency on his proposal. Right sizing, like one of my colleagues said yesterday, basically mean knocking off the people, putting them out of work and putting them on the breadline. And it reminded me, sir, of another word. It reminded me, sir, of a word from the Burnhamite era. Those are retrenchment. Because in that era, the late 90s, well, this in fact might have also been the era of President Hoyt, because it would be late 80s, the era of retrenchment. A nice word to dress up, a big word to fool people when in fact you're knocking them off, you're sending them home, you're putting them out of money, you're taking bread out of their children's mouths. Yes, a word like sagacity, they like big words to fool the people. They like to use big words to fool the people. And so, Mr. Speaker, that is what we were treated to for 5 days. Arguments that made no sense, internal inconsistency, pretending to be concerned about the deficit and debt, when in fact all that you're proposing is additional spending and in fact inefficient spending and further erosion of the tax base, posturing like you are concerned about Dutch disease, but still objecting to investments in infrastructure that are so critical to ensure the competitiveness of the non-oil economy. Actually, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Norton did say one thing that I can't resist highlighting. He was speaking about promoting the manufacturing sector, industrial and manufacturing sector. And his solution, this is where he came with the Puerto Rico example. Sir, Mr. Norton's proposal to promote manufacturing and industrial and manufacturing development in Ghana is apparently the Puerto Rico model. His targeted tax breaks, I think he called them, right? Was that what he called them? Something like that. Targeted tax breaks, industrial policies, stuck in the theories of the 1970s and 1980s, industrial policies aimed at promoting industrialization, tax breaks that are targeted, reduction of corporate tax rates for specific sectors. Sir, needless to say, everybody would like to pay less taxes. Nobody's in doubt about that. And every government would like to deliver to its population lower taxes. It would make us incredibly popular and make us immediately re-electable. We understand that everybody wants to pay less taxes, and as a government seeking re-election, we would like to win this popularity. But successive PPPC governments, not only this one, but successive PPPC People's Progressive Party civic governments have refused to mortgage the future of the country at the altar of short-term expediency. We are not going to pursue short-term popularity by saying to people, we're going to reduce your tax rates to zero. Because we are a government for the long haul. We're a government for the long haul. And we want, and we know, and we value our credibility. And so we are frank with the people of Guyana. We say, look, you can't reduce the taxes to zero. The government needs to raise tax revenues. We're going to try over time to be able progressively to reduce the tax rate. But what was astonishing, sir, is how out of touch Mr. Norton was. Because he meandered all over this Puerto Rico model and industrial policy and this and that and the other. And then he ended by saying, we don't want to wait for low electricity rates, which may never materialize. Sir, if you speak to anybody so he dismissed the electricity didn't feature in his whole discussion about promoting industrial and manufacturing activity in Guyana. Nowhere in that discussion featured the cost of electricity. Sir, now you imagine everybody who is in manufacturing is listening and watching. Everybody who is in manufacturing is listening and watching. How are they supposed to take this seriously? I mean, obviously, this thing about lower taxes will appeal to everybody, so they will like it. Anybody would like that. But if you are not prepared to acknowledge, how important electricity is to the cost of doing business for manufacturers, you are living in a parallel universe. You are living in La La Land. You are removed from reality. Well, I don't know if he has spent, I hear apparently he spends a lot of time in a place that is called Bam Bam Alley. I don't know if it is Bam Bam Alley, the fictional place that the Honorable Member, Mr. Dattadin, spoke of. But apparently, I don't know if in Bam Bam Alley, and I hasten to say to everybody else who visits Bamba Mali that I intend them no disrespect whatsoever. I commiserate with you for having to endure Mr. Norton on a regular basis. But sir, I don't know if in this fictional Bamba Mali, electricity cost is not a problem. But if you speak to anybody in manufacturing, if you speak to anybody engaged in industrial activity, if you speak to any household in Guyana, electricity is one of the biggest bugbears, one of the biggest irritants, one of the biggest costs that they have to bear. This People's Progressive Party government will fix that problem. And we're well on our way to that. And so, sir, I could go on. But I will conclude by saying that the nation spent the last 5 days listening to those of us on this side of the House articulate the policies of the People's Progressive Party civic government, and listening to the APNU AFC articulate what should have been their alternative. Instead, sir, they heard an incoherent, inconsistent, belligerent, for the greater part, belligerent, because many of them come here, they like to pretend to be decent. They like to pretend to be decent, and they are the most vulgar and belligerent. The Honorable Member Cathy Hughes comes up here and pretends to be the paragon of decency, and then proceeds to deliver targeted personal insults to people. And she thinks people are not watching her. She thinks people are not watching her, pretending to be this paragon of decency and, and conciliation and, inclusivity and willing to work with everybody. And in the same breath, sir, in the same breath, delivering nasty personal insults to people. And she thinks that anybody's affected by her. Sir, a minister who was so barefaced, sir. Sir, I didn't want to go here, but, sir, I could cite here an article. Cathy Hughes doled out over $6 million from public purse to pay herself. Miss Prim and Proper. Right? Doled out $6 million from the public purse to pay herself, her own company, signing the vouchers herself, signing the invoice herself, to pay herself, her own company, causing other government agencies to hire her company. Look at this here. The Department of the Energy, the Director of Energy, a public servant, being forced to confess, we did not do due diligence. Bino admits on Video Mega saga. We did not do due diligence on Video Mega saga, says Bino. Causing by virtue of her position other government agencies, not only her own, this was the Department of Energy, to hire her own company. And then come here, sir, and pretending to be the paragon of decency, and then to want to turn around and insult other people. The likes of Cathy Hughes, of the Honorable Cathy Hughes, sir. The likes of the Honorable Cathy Hughes have absolutely no moral authority whatsoever, even to sit in this house. And it's not an isolated case, They talk about family and friends. Actually, you're right, it fits nicely. What were they saying? Family and friends and the favorites. How you rank this? Sir, this is not even family and friends. This is paying yourself.
Which law form got the constitutional favorites?
This is paying yourself, sir. They think they are judging us by their standards. They are judging us by their standards. Look, I could show you hundreds of examples. Look at this. Housing minister's husband has contract to build houses for her ministry. The housing minister's husband, sir.
The contract prepared in the ministry.
Sir, and come here, sir. I got distracted. I didn't intend it to. I didn't intend to go down this road, sir.
Patterson brother left the same
Sir, I didn't intend to go down this road because if I go down this is a road that I could spend the next 6 hours on. Would you like me to, sir? If I hear sufficient acclamation from my colleagues on this side of the house, I will go down that road. I will go down that road.
Let me take a back street. Let me take a back
All 6 hours of it.
Not yet.
And so, Mr. Speaker, let me say this, sir. Over the people of Guyana have not forgotten. They haven't forgotten Cathy Hughes giving business to her own company and causing other government agencies to give business to her own company and just having to make excuses to justice. They haven't forgotten. They haven't forgotten. The people of Guyana haven't forgotten. The people of Guyana are not deceived. They're not deceived by, I don't want to get into who has what accent and so on. I pride myself on being relatively open-minded on people should be free to speak however they wish. I speak how I want to speak, and I feel people should be free. If you want to mimic the British aristocracy, that's entirely your business. If you want to mimic the British aristocracy, that's entirely your business, sir. I don't belong to the British aristocracy. I'm only a half-educated Guyanese man from Georgetown. Right? So I am not going to go down the road about who speaks how and so on. I believe people, I believe communication is about getting your message across, right? So if she feels she gets her message across, speaking however she does, I think one of my colleagues said that it resembles closely the accent of the British aristocracy, the King's English as it is now called. That's her choice. I'm not going to all of that. My point, you can speak however you wish, honorable member. As do I. But to come here and to pretend to pose as some kind of moral authority, when in fact you are the perpetrator of such vulgarity in public office, is nothing short of shameless. Nothing short of shameless. And they seem to believe that they have a monopoly on personal insults. They can insult everybody over here. They can insult everybody over here. But their skin very thin, sir. Their skin very thin. They want pelt insult. But they can't take back the truth. The truth hurts them. The truth hurts them. But sir, I didn't hear the kind of acclamation that I was expecting in relation to going down that road. So I will simply say this, that for 5 days, sir, the people of Guyana and the world at large were reminded of the true nature of the PPP and the true nature of APNU AFC. We ain't gonna come and tell you we got a big elaborate plan and a big strategy and we're doing a couple survey and we're trying to come up with an action plan and green paper and white paper. We speak to the people on a we don't send, if you can't come, we don't send no cardboard thing. We speak to the people every day. We listen to the people, sir. We have a fairly good sense of what the people's priorities are, and we will deliver on those priorities. Forget about all the fancy plan and policy and strategy and all of that. On the other hand, sir, sir, we're not shy of saying to the people of Guyana that we have to be careful as we navigate this period. You can't get carried away, you're an oil producer. All of them said, we now have money. We now have money, spend the money. That was their mantra. Spend the money. That was their mantra. Sir, this government will be frank with the Guyanese people. Just like a responsible family will spend some of what they're earning on their needs of today, but they will also be investing and saving in the things that matter for the future, and stash some away for a rainy day, exactly like how a responsible family would manage their own budget. This People's Progressive Party civic government will manage the national budget. Sir, every day, there are Guyanese families in their homes making budgetary choices. Every day. You might be a carpenter. You might be a carpenter. You get a job, or your business is busy now, you get a couple of jobs, you make an extra small piece. A lot of people are experiencing that. Some of it you might consume, you might say, you know something, I always wanted to give my children something, buy something extra that they always wanted to consume. But some of it you'll say, you know what, I want to upgrade my house. I want to invest in my capital stock. I want to enhance the value of my property. So you'll say, you know what, we ain't gonna eat out all. We're gonna maybe buy a couple nice things to eat because I get an extra job, but I'm going to use the rest to paint up the house, to increase the value of my asset, to make it last longer. Or I'm going to put it down on a vehicle, maybe a truck or some equipment, so that I could move around my tools and my workmen, so that maybe I could set up a small contracting business. So there are families all over Guyana right now that are making those choices, striking the balance between consuming today and saving and investing for tomorrow. So they understand this. And they're not fooled by this thing to say, spend everything now, share out everything now. They understand. Managing the national budget is not that different from managing a household budget. So the people of Guyana were treated to a good display of what distinguishes the People's Progressive Party from APNU AFC. Capability and competence. You heard my colleagues, each one of them on this side of the house, articulate a clear vision inspired by our party manifesto and inspired by the presidential vision that guides all that we do. You heard a single coherent vision from us. You heard an articulation of that vision. You have seen the implementation of that vision. And in contrast, you got this motley crew. You got this motley crew, this medley of incoherent and inconsistent and oftentimes belligerent utterances. Our commitment, sir, to you, and through you, sir, to the people of Guyana, is that we will continue to manage the economy of Guyana to ensure that the things that people need fixed now, that those things are fixed. That's what Budget 2022 is all about. Fixing the community roads that are an irritant. Fixing the medical centers so that people can get good quality health care. Delivering remote medicine through telemedicine. Fixing the schools so that all school children have a place in school, primary and secondary. Providing tertiary education and technical and vocational education so that people can get the training that they need to participate in the oil and gas sector or in the construction sector. Investing in the public capital stock, the roads and bridges that are critical to generate long-term economic growth to our country. Roads, bridges, energy, importantly, the things that matter for the long-term future. Creating jobs. Sir, they talk about roads. Every road that we build creates dozens of jobs, whether it's in delivery of the materials, the workmen. Every house that we build under the housing program creates jobs for Guyanese people. And so that is our commitment. And I should have addressed another point, sir, with your permission. I was going to close. But permit me, sir, because it's a pressing issue. I should have spoken about inflation because it's a good example of how they misrepresented facts. Just like how they misrepresented Amila, just like how they misrepresented the nutrition, just like how they misrepresented the economic statistics. Sir, look, the reality is that there has been some upward movement in prices, and we, as an honest and credible government, would be the first to say so. We have reported the inflation numbers. But you cannot come and discuss inflation without recognizing the global realities that are prevailing. And anybody who wants to be taken seriously has to take account of the fact that fuel prices have been increasing, fertilizer prices have been increasing, freight costs have been increasing. Those are realities. You can't, no, sir, everybody in Guyana knows what's happening around the world. Everybody's online now. And so from the time you start to speak about it, of course, inflation is a concern, and we continue to make the several interventions that we've been making. You know, had we not removed excise taxes from fuel, fuel prices would have been 3 times what they are today. We took off fuel taxes to make sure that the Guyanese people don't have to bear the brunt of that increase. That has removed a burden of more than $17 billion on the Guyanese consuming public. Now, fuel prices still remain elevated. And we recognize this, and that's why we've committed to keeping the fuel taxes off. The reality, too, is that in an economy like ours that is growing so rapidly, in addition to imported pressures, you have an expansion in domestic demand. That's the reality. You have more people working. You have more people earning incomes. Therefore, you have more people going to the market and buying the same goods and services. That's the reality. You have international companies that are buying goods and services as well. So the reality is that in a rapidly growing economy such as Guyana, some amount of price pressure will unavoidably arise. We have, as a responsible government, first of all, you have to analyze this issue properly, as we have done. You have to be frank with people. You have to adopt policies that can seek to address, as far as you possibly can, things like supply-side constraints. So, for example, that's why we're investing heavily in agriculture, to ramp up domestic food production. It's not an accident that we've been providing the fertilizer support to the farmers. It's not by accident that we're distributing breeding and planting material to the farmers, because we want to ramp up food production. The reality is that high food prices, in fact, also present an opportunity for producers and farmers. And Minister Ben made this point very eloquently, that you actually, our agriculture sector actually has an opportunity now to ramp up production, and an opportunity that should be seized. But here again, this was yet another issue where the members on that side of the House came purely for the purposes of political posturing and grandstanding, wanting to pretend that these global realities don't exist, wanting to pretend. One of them said, well, how does Bora, I think he said Bora and Okro. What does global inflation have to do with Bora and Okro, or Bora and something? Bora and Karaila or something. Bora and cabbage. Sir, any farmer who uses fuel, any farmer who uses fertilizer, any farmer who uses transportation, which is fuel-driven, how are you fertilizing the field? How are you getting your tractor, or your truck, or your canter to the back dam? When you cut your Karaila or your Bora or your cabbage, how are you getting it out of the back dam to the market? You're going to pay a truck or a canter? But apparently, sir, they're so removed from reality. They're so removed from practical. You know, they have these textbook notions. You know, it's textbook notions. Bora is grown locally. Bora ain't got nothing to do with global inflation. Right? They're so out of touch with reality and out of touch with the way things work. You know, you want to know where these people have been living all their lives. Like, they're so removed from the real world. So removed from the real world. And the people of Guyana know better. The farmers are watching. And the farmers say, what? Do these people understand? We got to buy fertilizer, we got to buy fuel. That's the reality. And so let me say very clearly that we recognize the importance of containing price increases. That is why, in fact, you know, you may ask, why we ain't giving 100% salary increase? You know what would happen if we give 100% salary increase? You jump up and say, give 50% salary increase. You know what would happen? If you give 50% salary increase, the salary after the 50% will be worth less than what it was before, because of what would happen with inflation. That's the reality. That is the reality. And so a responsible government has to approach these matters carefully and responsibly. So it's easy to jump up and say double salaries, that gonna solve inflation. Double the cash grant, that gonna solve inflation. Sir, anybody with a modicum of common sense, and I have great faith in the Guyanese people, they have more than a modicum of common sense, knows the absurdity of what our colleagues on that side of the House are presenting. And so, Mr. Speaker, if I can return now to my conclusion, as I was saying, we were treated, we were regaled, the world was regaled. We were regaled for 5 days, sir. We were regaled for 5 days, sir, with a display. We had put on full display. We endured. We endured, sir, the nation and the world endured for 5 days. A display, on the one hand, a display by the APNU AFC of their abject incompetence, ineptitude, and inclination for distortion and misrepresentation. Put simply, the people of Guyana were reminded once again why they decided, why the people of Guyana, decided to put the APNU AFC into opposition in 2020. And similarly, sir, the people of Guyana were reminded of why they decided in 2020 that they wanted to place the responsibility of navigating Guyana, the governmental responsibility of navigating Guyana through this very challenging period in our country's economic history, why they made the conscious decision to task the People's Progressive Party Civic with that responsibility by placing us in government. And we take that charge seriously, sir, and we will discharge it faithfully and diligently. With those fewer than usual words.
Yes. Relatively.
I thank you very much, sir. And I thank my colleagues in the House, and I thank the people of Guyana for tuning in and listening to this debate and analyzing and considering the issues as carefully as they did. And of course, we will be back, sir, next week. At the appropriate time next week, I will be moving the necessary motions to secure the approval of Budget 2023. Thank you very much, sir.